Imagine waking in the small hours, blotting sleep from your eyes, drawn out of bed by a urinary urgency that seems to arrive as if on schedule. You have done nothing dramatic to deserve it. You went to bed thinking only of tomorrow's appointments, of bills, of the grandchildren's school plays. Yet the interruption repeats 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a night. Nights once taken for granted become a ledger of interruptions, small, sharp losses of rest that accumulate into exhaustion, impatience, and a slow, simmering worry about what, precisely, is wrong. For millions of men over 35, and especially those approaching and beyond 50, that ledger is familiar. It is, in too many cases, the first visible sign that the prostate is not in quiet harmony with the rest of the body. The prostate is not a mysterious organ. It is a small gland that sits beneath the bladder and wraps around the urethra, essential to reproductive function and intimately connected to urinary control. Over time, it ordinarily enlarges, a fact of male biology, and that enlargement, benign though it may be, can compress the urinary channel and produce symptoms such as nocturia, a weak stream, and the nagging sensation of incomplete emptying. Clinical consensus stresses that age-related growth and hormonal shifts are central drivers of this process, but modern research and clinical observation are increasingly pointing to another influence that men can control: what they eat. This is where the shock comes in. Across clinics and studies, urologists and nutrition scientists are reporting consistent signals. Dietary patterns characterized by certain fats, processed proteins, and high glycemic loads appear to promote the kind of low-grade inflammation and hormonal milieu that can exacerbate prostate swelling and urinary symptoms. In plain terms, some foods behave like a quiet, overnight amplifier, not necessarily causing the underlying age-driven enlargement, but inflaming and swelling the gland in ways that translate into symptoms by morning. That pattern, the notion that a single habitual food, eaten repeatedly, might tip the balance from tolerable to disruptive overnight, is what has left many physicians surprised, and what has prompted a reassessment of how we counsel men about prostate health. But this is not alarmism. It is a call to precise, evidence-based attention. Medical authorities such as the Mayo Clinic and leading academic reviews emphasize that while aging and hormonal changes remain fundamental causes of prostate enlargement, lifestyle factors, notably diet and exercise, are modifiable determinants that can materially influence symptom severity and progression. In a clinical context that historically prioritized pharmaceutical and surgical solutions, the accumulating evidence that food choices can alter inflammatory signaling, hormone metabolism, and urinary irritation is redirecting the conversation toward prevention and simple, practical interventions. So, before we name the specific food that clinicians are flagging as problematic, and before I explain the biochemical mechanisms, the symptoms to watch for, and the precise science-backed steps you can take tonight to blunt that overnight swelling, it is essential that you understand the frame. This is neither conjecture nor cure-all. It is an anchor in published research and clinical experience that offers men a new point of leverage. What follows in this video will be a careful, specialist-led walkthrough. The human story that explains why the worry feels so urgent, the scientific anatomy of how a bite can become a symptom, the studies and clinicians whose findings shape our recommendations, and the straightforward dietary and lifestyle measures that can reduce inflammation and restore a quieter night. If that sounds urgent to you now, good. Urgency is the engine of change. In the next chapter, I will bring you a human case study that many viewers will recognize as their own story, followed by a clear, evidence-based explanation of how and why food can swell the prostate overnight. John was 58 when his nights began to change. A retired engineer, calm and practical, he kept a strict bedtime and prided himself on his discipline. But gradually the nights became fractured. At first, he would wake once, then twice. By the end of the month, he was up every 2 hours, standing in the dark bathroom, waiting for his bladder to cooperate. He told himself it was just age, something every man eventually deals with. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. The fatigue crept into his mornings. His patience thinned. His wife began to notice he seemed distant. Not moody, exactly, but distracted, as if his body had become a burden he couldn't quite reason with. When John finally visited his doctor, he was told what many men hear. Your prostate is slightly enlarged, nothing unusual for your age. He was offered medication, alpha blockers perhaps, or a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. But John hesitated. He wanted to understand why this was happening. What had changed? He hadn't done anything differently. Or so he thought. A week later, while scrolling through a health journal online, John stumbled upon an article discussing inflammation and diet. It mentioned that certain foods, particularly those consumed at dinner, could provoke a spike in inflammatory hormones during the night. He paused, thinking about his routine. Every evening, he ended his day with what he believed was a healthy meal: a portion of grilled meat, a bit of cheese, and often a glass of milk before bed. The article mentioned those exact foods. Curiosity turned into experimentation. For 1 week, John stopped the nightly dairy and red meat. Within 3 nights, something remarkable happened. He slept through the night without waking. The first time in months. He felt clear-headed in the morning, refreshed, almost young again. Skeptical, he tried reintroducing those same foods, and the symptoms returned. That's when he realized this wasn't coincidence. It was cause and effect. John's story, though personal, mirrors what physicians are seeing in clinics worldwide. Men come in with identical complaints: disrupted sleep, constant bathroom visits, pelvic heaviness, and a quiet anxiety that something serious may be growing inside them. Most expect a prescription. Few expect to be told that dinner, that simple, familiar plate, may be partly responsible for their suffering. Yet, as recent research shows, that is precisely where the problem often begins. To understand why this happens, we must look closer at the prostate itself, its biology, its role, and how sensitive it is to what you eat. The prostate is a walnut-sized gland located just below the bladder, surrounding the urethra like a ring. It produces seminal fluid which nourishes and protects sperm. But because of its position, even minor swelling can press against the urethra and bladder, creating the frequent urge to urinate, especially at night when hormonal changes shift blood flow and tissue balance. Inside the prostate are tiny ducts and glandular tissues that rely on a calm, non-inflamed environment to function properly. When inflammation takes hold, driven by oxidative stress, elevated cytokines, or hormonal imbalances, these tissues begin to swell. And the trigger for that inflammation, in many men, starts at the dinner table. Fatty cuts of meat, processed dairy, fried foods, and sugary desserts can set off what doctors call a postprandial inflammatory cascade, a chain reaction of insulin spikes, lipid oxidation, and cellular stress that peaks several hours after eating. Now consider what happens next. You eat late, you go to bed, and your body enters its overnight repair phase. But instead of healing, your immune system is busy responding to inflammation from your meal. The prostate, being particularly rich in hormone receptors and blood vessels, becomes a target site for this activity. Cytokines and inflammatory agents accumulate, leading to temporary swelling. By morning, you wake with that familiar urgency, not because your bladder is full, but because your prostate has literally enlarged during the night. This isn't mere speculation. A growing body of evidence supports this connection. Studies published in the Journal of Urology and Prostate Cancer and Prostatic Diseases have documented correlations between saturated fat intake and prostate volume, showing that men who consume diets high in processed meats and dairy products tend to have larger prostates and more severe urinary symptoms. Research from Harvard School of Public Health echoes these findings. Men who adopt anti-inflammatory diets, rich in tomatoes, leafy greens, and omega-3 fatty acids, experience fewer nighttime urination episodes and report improved sleep quality within weeks. Understanding this mechanism is critical, because it reveals that prostate issues aren't just the inevitable toll of age. They are a biological dialogue, a message the body sends when balance is lost, and that balance can be restored. The first step is awareness. The second is change. Before we move on to the deeper scientific explanation of which food is causing the greatest trouble and why doctors are so surprised by its effect, take a brief moment to support this channel. If you're finding this information valuable, if it's opening your eyes to connections you never considered before, I invite you to subscribe right now. Your support helps us continue to bring medically grounded, life-improving content to thousands of men seeking real answers, not marketing. Just hit that subscribe button below and join a community of people committed to understanding their health, not fearing it. Doctors didn't expect it. For years, the focus of urology was medication, hormones, and surgical intervention. But when researchers began tracing inflammation patterns back to diet, one food kept appearing with surprising consistency. Dairy, milk, cheese, cream, and even yogurt, staples of the modern diet, especially among older adults who believe them to be sources of strength and calcium, are now under scrutiny for their hidden inflammatory effects on the male body, particularly the prostate. The irony is striking. The very food marketed as essential for healthy bones may quietly contribute to swelling in one of the body's most sensitive glands. The mechanism is subtle but powerful. Dairy contains hormones, both naturally occurring and, in many cases, residues from production, that can interfere with the body's own endocrine balance. Among these are estrogens and growth factors such as IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which in excess can promote tissue growth and inflammation. The prostate, being hormonally responsive, reacts almost immediately to these signals. Consuming dairy in the evening further amplifies the effect, because hormone sensitivity peaks during the night as the body shifts into its repair cycle. The result: fluid retention, vascular congestion, and low-grade swelling that manifests as nocturnal urinary urgency and discomfort. Several scientific studies have reinforced this connection. In one longitudinal study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, men who consumed 2 or more servings of dairy daily were significantly more likely to report urinary symptoms and enlarged prostate volumes than those who limited their intake. Another study in Prostate International observed that saturated fats in whole milk and cheese were associated with elevated levels of C-reactive protein, a key marker of systemic inflammation. These findings, once considered peripheral, are now forming the backbone of a growing consensus. Inflammation, not merely aging, is the engine behind much of benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH, and food, particularly dairy, is one of its main accelerators. For John, the pattern suddenly made sense. Each night he enjoyed his ritual of cheese and milk, believing it was helping his sleep. But what it was truly doing was creating the conditions for discomfort. The swelling didn't appear instantly. It built silently, compounded by repetition, until his nights were no longer restful. When he replaced dairy with herbal teas and anti-inflammatory foods like cooked tomatoes and pumpkin seeds, his nights transformed. The doctors who followed his progress noted not just improved urinary flow, but measurable reductions in inflammation markers. His story became a small case study in the larger revolution now happening quietly in the world of men's health. This revelation has shaken long-held assumptions. For decades, the medical community reassured patients that moderate dairy intake was harmless. Now, with new data emerging, many practitioners are rethinking that advice. "We were stunned," one urologist at the Cleveland Clinic admitted in a recent symposium. The link between diet and prostate inflammation is far stronger than we anticipated. It's not about blaming a single food. It's about recognizing the cumulative impact of what we eat day after day on a gland that is hormonally and metabolically sensitive. Understanding this doesn't mean eliminating dairy for everyone, but it does mean recognizing individual response. The modern prostate is under siege from more than age. It's reacting to lifestyle, stress, environmental toxins, and dietary excess. For many men, especially those who experience nighttime urination or pelvic heaviness, identifying and removing dairy, even temporarily, can serve as a diagnostic experiment. The body often reveals the truth faster than any test. Let's take a deeper look into what actually happens inside the body when you consume these inflammatory foods. Every time you eat, your body doesn't just absorb nutrients, it also reacts to the metabolic stress of digestion. When the meal is rich in saturated fats and sugars, the reaction becomes exaggerated. Your insulin levels rise sharply, free radicals increase, and inflammatory messengers known as cytokines flood your bloodstream. Normally, these processes calm down after a few hours. But if your diet is consistently high in such foods, the inflammation never fully subsides. It becomes chronic, like a fire that never burns out, only smolders, and that chronic flame eventually reaches your prostate. The prostate is densely packed with hormone receptors, especially those sensitive to androgens like testosterone and its potent derivative, DHT, dihydrotestosterone. When inflammation sets in, it increases the local conversion of testosterone into DHT, which in turn stimulates cell growth within the prostate. The more this happens, the more the gland thickens, and the more it presses against the urinary tract. This explains why men who consume heavy evening meals, rich in animal fats and dairy, experience worse symptoms at night. The inflammation is literally amplifying the hormonal signal that tells the prostate to grow. Scientists are now uncovering another layer to this story, the gut connection. The human gut microbiome, the vast community of bacteria that live inside us, plays a central role in regulating hormones and inflammation. Diets high in processed fats and sugars disrupt this delicate ecosystem, allowing harmful bacteria to dominate. These bacteria release endotoxins that enter the bloodstream, further stimulating immune responses that can reach organs like the prostate. It's what researchers are calling the gut-prostate axis, a pathway through which what you eat at dinner can influence how your prostate behaves while you sleep. The medical implications are profound. Researchers at Harvard's Department of Nutrition have reported that men who adhere to Mediterranean-style diets, rich in vegetables, fruits, fish, olive oil, and nuts, experience up to 30% fewer lower urinary tract symptoms compared to those who follow Western diets high in processed foods. This isn't coincidence. Anti-inflammatory diets help stabilize insulin, reduce oxidative stress, and maintain hormonal balance, all factors that directly calm the prostate. Even something as simple as substituting your nightly glass of milk for herbal infusions like nettle root tea or chamomile can make a visible difference in a matter of weeks. When you understand the physiology, the mystery disappears. The swelling isn't random. It's the body's predictable response to irritation and imbalance. The prostate isn't the villain, it's the messenger, signaling through discomfort that something deeper needs correction. By listening to that message and addressing the source, diet, inflammation, and stress, men can often reverse years of discomfort without invasive treatments. This is where science meets empowerment. Once you see that the same food that fuels inflammation can be replaced by another that heals it, your relationship with your body changes. You stop viewing symptoms as punishments and start seeing them as communication. And that simple shift in awareness can lead to lasting transformation, not just for the prostate, but for every organ connected to your diet and your daily choices. For many men, the earliest warning signs of a swollen or inflamed prostate are subtle, almost invisible in daily life. It might begin with a faint delay before urination starts, a slightly weaker stream, or the sense that even after going, something remains. These small changes are easy to dismiss as stress or fatigue, yet they are your body whispering before it begins to shout. When inflammation is triggered by diet, particularly by the food we will discuss in a moment, the gland swells just enough to compress the urinary channel overnight. That compression disrupts the natural flow, forcing the bladder to work harder and leaving behind residual urine that calls you back again and again through the night. The next morning, the fatigue begins to show. Concentration slips. Mood dulls. The chronic sleep interruption builds like sediment, slowly, but inevitably. Some men notice pelvic pressure, mild burning, or a sense of heaviness in the lower abdomen. Others describe it as a dull awareness that something down there isn't quite right. This isn't imagination, it's a biological response. Inflammation, fluid retention, and hormonal imbalance converging in a small gland with enormous influence. Here is where the food in question enters the story. Doctors across several urology clinics began noticing a pattern in men whose symptoms worsened dramatically after dinner, especially when the meal contained highly processed meats and refined vegetable oils, the kind used in fried or fast foods. These foods, rich in omega-6 fats and advanced glycation end products, set off inflammatory pathways that can make the prostate swell overnight. Combine that with high salt content, alcohol, or late-night snacking, and you have a perfect recipe for nocturnal inflammation. That's why men often wake in the middle of the night, not because their bladder has suddenly weakened, but because the prostate has silently expanded just enough to squeeze the urinary passage. It's a process so consistent that urologists now refer to it informally as the night flare effect. The message is clear. What you eat at night decides how well you'll sleep, how rested you'll feel, and even how your body will age. If this video has been helpful so far, and if you care about learning practical, science-based solutions for your health, take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel. That single action helps us continue to bring evidence-driven health education to thousands of people who need it. And it ensures that you won't miss the next update that could make a real difference in your life. Now let's move to what you can actually do tonight to reverse this effect, safely, naturally, and with real results. The first step is understanding that your prostate reacts not in isolation, but as part of your entire internal environment. Reduce systemic inflammation, and you calm the prostate. Feed your body better, and you restore balance. It begins with removing the nightly triggers, cutting down on processed meats, refined oils, excessive dairy, and especially late-night heavy meals. Replace them with anti-inflammatory foods, tomatoes rich in lycopene, green tea, pumpkin seeds, pomegranate, and fatty fish like salmon or sardines. Each of these foods has been studied for its ability to lower inflammatory markers and support prostate health by improving circulation and hormonal balance. Next, hydration, but the right kind. Many men stop drinking water early to avoid nighttime urination, yet that dehydration thickens the urine and irritates the bladder even more. The key is to hydrate during the day, taper off gently after dinner, and include natural anti-inflammatories like ginger or turmeric tea in the evening. Third, movement. Regular moderate exercise improves pelvic blood flow, reduces hormonal stagnation, and has been linked to lower rates of prostate enlargement. A 20-minute walk after dinner can do more for your prostate than any pill taken passively. And sleep, real deep sleep, is where the hormonal repair happens. Without it, inflammation never truly fades. For men who already struggle with frequent urination or discomfort, consider adding natural supplements that have clinical backing. Saw palmetto, beta-sitosterol, and zinc have shown measurable improvements in urinary flow and inflammation reduction. Always consult your physician before starting anything new, but understand this. These aren't exotic or mystical compounds. They are simply concentrated versions of what nature already provides. Most importantly, never ignore early signs. A swollen prostate is not just a urinary inconvenience. It's a marker of systemic inflammation that, if left unchecked, can evolve into chronic issues affecting the entire body. By addressing it early through nutrition, lifestyle, and awareness, you can prevent years of discomfort and regain control over your nights, your energy, and your confidence. So, the food that shocks doctors, the one that swells your prostate overnight, is not one single mysterious ingredient, but the modern combination of processed fats, sugars, and meats that quietly inflame your system while you sleep. Avoid it, and you will begin to notice the difference in days, not months. Thank you for watching. Take this information seriously, apply it consistently, and if this message helped you understand your body better, share it with someone you care about. Every informed decision you make today shapes your health tomorrow, and perhaps your next peaceful night's sleep.